The Florida Panthers returned home for the first time in about 3 weeks, but unfortunately, their 9-game winning streak was snapped at the hands of the Nashville Predators. But we are going to bring in Jacob Winans on today's episode of Locked On Florida Panthers, where we discuss this home loss against Nashville and what went wrong in this one, and also look ahead to the rest of this homestand on today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome to this Wednesday, February 23rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Let me introduce myself. My name is Armando Velez. I'm from PantherParkway.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Monoman12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also follow Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark. Will be covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. So a little bit of housekeeping stuff for the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We are now doing themes for the podcast, where every Wednesday now we are bringing in Jacob Winans, my fellow friend and multiple time guest on the show. We are calling these episodes on Wednesdays Winans Wednesdays as a little bit of a theme. And I'm Jacob. Welcome once again to the show, and thank you once again for coming up and coming on to the show for this new theme of Locked On Panthers.
Yeah, man, happy to be here. I was definitely thrilled that you came to me with the idea, and really looking forward to it.
Thanks, man, and for sure. And we're also going to do the same thing on Fridays, but we won't say that for the audience until Friday comes. So keeping the listeners on their toes a little bit for what's going to be going on Fridays. But let's talk about Tuesday night's game against Nashville. So the Florida Panthers return home. They lose by a final score of 6-4 at the hands of the Nashville Predators, a team that just snapped their 4-game losing streak, a team that gave up 8 power play goals in their last 4 games, and kind of a team that had a bunch of gaps in between their games before playing this one. They start up their backup goaltender in David Rittich in this one, right before they take on the Dallas Stars on Pekka Rinne's jersey retirement night and before their Stadium Series game against Tampa Bay. But what would you say is your biggest takeaway of this 6-4 loss against the Nashville Predators?
Yeah, so the Panthers, they haven't really had any home struggles, but if there's one thing we can point to as kind of a minor issue, it's usually that first game back at home coming off a road trip. A lot of teams struggle with that. It can be a little bit challenging to get your legs under you in that first game back home. Tonight, it didn't seem to be so much the legs. It just seemed to be some mental errors here and there. Definitely no cause for overreaction or panic, but it's just something they'll want to address going forward. Just starting off homestands well, coming off a road trip. And then we kind of got goalied a little bit. It's hard to say that when you score 4 goals, but they kind of ran into Big Save Dave, who lived up to the nickname and made some key stops tonight.
Yeah, Big Save Dave got 44 saves on 48 attempts by the Florida Panthers for this one. And on the other end, the Florida Panthers, since coming off of the Olympic break / All-Star break, they've done a really good job in front of Sergei Bobrovsky, not allowing so many shots against in the last few games. But I spoke about on the podcast a few times that even with the few goals that Bobrovsky have let in, there's been a little bit of questionable goals letting in. But this game was about an average amount of shots on goals against for the Florida Panthers, and Bobrovsky, there is a more than one goal that we could say that you question yourselves like, maybe he should have gotten that one. I'm not sure if there was a screen on that Roman Yossi goal. I need to see the replay again. But just, and Bobrovsky was asked if, Bruno was asked if Bobrovsky was burnt out, and Bruno said that gave up too many opportunities in front of him. And a coach is never going to blame their goalie for losses, but what do you think of the workload that Bobrovsky is having right now?
Yeah, so for his first time as a Panther, he's really become the every night kind of guy. Just what you expect for the price tag, but maybe not the best strategy going forward. In the past, we've had Chris Drieger, and they were alternating almost on a nightly basis. So you didn't really see Bob having to handle a long string of games. I feel like a goalie is more affected by that little kind of hangover coming off of a long road trip, and he was starting every game on that road trip, and then comes back, has to play at home. So it's a quick turnaround for him. Maybe he was a little bit burnt out. I can't see him not starting the Columbus game. He tends to play well against his former team, so I would expect to see him in that game. But I gotta think either JoJo or Spencer Knight is going to end up getting at least a start or two on this homestand, because you can't burn the tread off of your goalie before playoff time. They have to kind of manage his workload a little bit.
Yeah, and Bobrovsky was the starter in both of the wins against the Columbus Blue Jackets, both when they scored 9 goals in the first one and 8 goals in the second go round against the Columbus Blue Jackets. But even before this, the road trip started in Carolina, Andrew Brunette did say that Spencer Knight will be coming back sometime throughout the homestand. We don't know when. I'm gonna guess is after the Edmonton game, because the Florida Panthers will have 4 days off, and then they bring the Ottawa Senators and the Detroit Red Wings come to town towards the tail end of the homestand. So that gives, looking at the schedule, I think that with that 4-day gap and the Charlotte Checkers having a few more games under their belt, I think that really gives an opportunity for not only Bobrovsky to get a little bit of a rest, but the whole team as well, regardless of whether they win these next 2 games or lose these next 2.
Yeah, I agree. Especially down the stretch, everyone's kind of playing through something right now, and the schedule is unforgiving. So getting a couple day break in there, it helps to let the guys regroup. They tend to do really well at home regardless. They tend to find the energy in the legs, but a break like that is huge, especially if you're going to integrate Spencer Knight back into things. And looking at the schedule, I think you make a good point on when we might see him return, and I would really, really be interested in seeing him start that Ottawa game. I would love to see him start that game and see how he handles that challenge, because that was probably his toughest hockey game. I would say most likely in his entire hockey career, giving up 8 goals to the Senators at home earlier this season. So I'd love to see him bounce back and get that start.
Absolutely, and people were wondering why he wasn't pulled, and people were questioning whether Bobrovsky was having an injury at the time, and that was right before the COVID shutdown of the entire NHL on December 14th when that game happened. And even so, the Florida Panthers, they snapped their 9-game home winning streak. They still score 4 goals. They still find a way, but just like you said, a few mental errors on the Florida Panthers side. Their first time this whole season that they've lost a game when having a 2-goal lead, and the Nashville Predators, they just found ways to just respond quickly. It's just the Florida Panthers just never found a way to get comfortable. And do you think that was just a product of being too comfortable on their home ice, as far as the Florida Panthers, even when they took a lead?
Yeah, I think it was just a little bit of laziness, a little bit of sloppiness. It just goes to show you can never really take your foot off the gas. And a team that may not be completely physically tired, but just a little bit mentally tired coming off of that road trip, you start to make a little bit of those mental errors, and you could see it caught up with them. Like Bruno said after the game, it was after goals. They would have a bad shift or two after scoring a goal where you think you can kind of relax a little bit, and Nashville just jumped all over them repeatedly. after they conceded a goal. So yeah, just got to learn how to. I won't say they have to learn because they've done a good job all season, but they have to get comfortable with protecting a lead. Maybe don't press so much for offense. Just learn how to lock it down a little bit after you get that 2-goal advantage, and then just pick your spots when you want to attack. It doesn't have to be full attack all the time. And then obviously Sam Bennett, the penalty late in the game was a mental lapse, and Bennett is probably the guy who we've seen do that a handful of times. You want to see that cleaned up, especially going into the playoffs. But he took full accountability for it, and I think he's going to bounce back from that. But you did touch on it with the offense. It's nice when you can look at a sloppy game and the offense still puts in 4 goals. I mean, the offense is definitely not an issue going forward.
We're going to talk a little bit about some positives as well, along with continuing the conversation with Sam Bennett and some of the top 6 in this one. But first, we're going to tell you all about Built Bar. And this is that time of year where I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolutions to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It's almost like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, marshmallow-y. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy, cinnamony, churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. These are going to be your new favorite. Go to Built.com and scroll down the macros chart, and you'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. At Built Bar, they're all about taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 at Built.com. Welcome back to the second segment of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I'm Armando Velez. I got Jacob Winans here. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local expert. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Continuing this conversation on this 6-4 loss against the Nashville Predators, the Florida Panthers in the first period, they came out firing, leading the shots on goal advantage as much as 11-2 in the first 15 or so minutes. And we talked a little bit about getting a little too comfortable. And the Florida Panthers towards the last 7 minutes of the first period only got one shot on goal in that one. And then we were starting to see the possession numbers from the Blackhawks game go in reversed from that first period, because in that first period for the Florida Panthers, it was 11-3 shot on goal advantage instead in favor of Chicago. We were starting to see that in this game, but flipped for the Panthers, and seeing the energy and seeing, though Sam Bennett didn't have the best game, Jonathan Huberdeau had quite a few turnovers that led to rushes at the other end. But I really do think that long term, Duclair on that second line is so much better for the Panthers.
Yeah, I agree. Sam Bennett's game came back to life. He scored a goal, but it wasn't just the goal. He was just active in the offensive zone, especially. Was really forechecking hard, brought the fourth line mentality to the second line, as he usually does. Huberdeau was his usual self, passing, but like you said, some turnovers that he'll have to clean up. Can't say I'm too concerned about it. He's leading the league in scoring, so he's obviously doing something right. And then Duclair again was flying, and that line I think it's really a 1A type of line. They're just as good as the top line. I'd love to see Duke stick on that line, but it's just going to come down to who we can find to place on Barkov's right wing going forward.
You're absolutely right, and the Panthers, they had a scout at the Philadelphia Flyers game tonight. So maybe that scout was looking at a little bit of Claude Giroux for a possible trade. I don't think it happens, but never say never. And Claude Giroux can play the wing and he could play center as well. So something to keep an eye out on for the Panthers. But you said Sam Bennett, you talked about him scoring a goal, but Big Save Dave made great saves, but they took advantage of a mental error by Rittich where he tried gloving it with his non-glove hand, and Sam
Mhm.
Bennett got it through. Talk about a big break for the Florida Panthers getting that, because I mean, when you go a big stretch of time without starting, sometimes your routine can go off, and maybe that's what happened with Dave Rittich. I can't really say, I'm not a goalie, but that's kind of what I think maybe kind of contributed to that. But let's talk about the non 5-on-5 stuff for the Panthers. They've been great all season with this game, but everything just fell apart for the Panthers really in that last period, and the majority of it was not on 5-on-5. I mean, Carrier cross checks Anthony Duclair near the boards, which looking at that, seeing that, just that cross check hurt me seeing it. And
Yeah.
then we talked about the bad pass by Huby to Ekblad, and then Tanner Jeannot just goes all by himself on Bobrovsky. Bennett cross checks Tolvanen, which he said bad penalty. And let's also talk about the rebound control for Sergei Bobrovsky. We haven't really seen big rebounds from Sergei Bobrovsky as well. But and even if the Florida Panthers were able to clear the puck as well, what do you think of the non 6-on-5 play for the Panthers in this game?
Yeah, so honestly, the special teams in the third period really had a complete breakdown. Kind of started a little before that. Just the special teams pendulum really swung in the favor of the Predators. I mean, we saw Barkov get a breakaway shorthanded, wasn't able to finish it, and he usually does. And then we have a power play after Duclair takes a nasty cross check. And I want to say Duclair probably gets beaten up more than almost anyone I've ever seen. He takes some nasty hits and just keeps getting up. But
Same
that
with
that was a
Marchment.
tough one. And yeah, Marchment too is another one. And you think on that power play you can score, really take control of the game, and kind of put the final nail on the Predators, but instead they end up tying it. You'd like to see Bob make that save on Jeannot. It wasn't an overly fancy move. You just got to cut off that backhand, and then of course you never want to give up a shorthanded goal. That was the Predators' first shorthanded goal all season too, so you don't want to be on the receiving end of that. And then the special teams really just had a complete breakdown. Bob had to give up a really bad rebound. No one cleared the crease, and Granlund's right there to put it in on the power play. So a shorty and then a power play goal against, that'll pretty much do it to you every time.
Mhm. We did see quite a few good things happen in this game.
Hmm.
Gudis gets his first goal of the season. I mean, the Florida Panthers don't rely on Radko Gudis to be a goal scorer, but hey, there have been so many times where Radko Gudas just shoots a puck towards the boards or towards the net, and it deflects and someone goes in on a rebound. So that's one thing I like that Gudas brings to the table. But hey, great screen by, I believe it was Mason Marchment right in front of the net. Yeah, it was Marchie who put that screen right in front of the net for Radko Gudas' first goal of the season. Aaron Ekblad continues his goal streak at 4 now, and a point in each of his last 6 games as well. Well into the Norris Trophy conversation. And Mackenzie Weegar the other day, he spoke to the media talking about how Aaron Ekblad definitely deserves to be in the Norris Trophy candidate. Right now, I think the leader in the race is Cale Makar of the Colorado Avalanche. But man, Aaron Ekblad is really picking up this whole season where he left off right before he fractured his leg. And this four-game goal streak, we're starting to see some things that Aaron Ekblad doesn't really do. Like we saw breakaways just last week for an overtime winner, and we're seeing more of really number 1 overall pick worthy Aaron Ekblad.
Yeah, you definitely touched on it, and what a defenseman matchup tonight. Yossi and Ekblad, two Norris Trophy candidates going head to head, both scoring a goal. I think Ekblad has solidified himself. I would think he's got to be a finalist for the Norris Trophy this year. His point totals are there, but I think his two-way play puts him ahead of guys like Adam Fox. His two-way play puts him probably ahead of Victor Hedman this year. So I think you have to consider him as a finalist. But yeah, just so much of what he's doing. We've thought he's been limited by his foot speed and in the past and things like that. But breakaways, rush goals, he's really doing it all. And he continues to live up to that number one overall pick billing that took a while for him to reach due to injuries and some development setbacks and coaching changes and things like that. But it's really great to see, and I would definitely say that he's, in my opinion, has surpassed what he was doing pre-injury last year. Just right from the jump this season, 2 goals in the season opener at home, and he's, in my opinion, has really taken a huge step forward. It has passed what he was already doing last season, which is remarkable after the injury he suffered.
Mm-hmm. And Anton Lundell didn't get an assist on that goal because there was a quick change of possession right before Aaron Ekblad grabbed the puck in the air and then went by himself. But man, Anton Lundell creating a turnover right before that is he's just continuing his growth as a hockey player, especially his defensive game as well. So that is really what really stuck out to me in that goal as well. And it's crazy. At that time, it was to make it 3-1, and then you 3 goals. I have it right in front of me. 3 goals in a 1 minute and 1 minute and 49 second span. You have 3 goals, and I'm just writing all my stuff down right in between, and I have to look back up at the TV every single time, and that I have to stop like mid sentence, and it just back and forth. The Florida Panthers were just unable to really get comfortable this whole game. But hey, the Florida Panthers, as far as a record going into the third period with a lead, that record was at least not spoiled because they went into the third period tied for the lead. But one more thing that I want to talk about is that we spoke all about in our roundtable the other day that we both agree that long term it's best for Barkov and Huberdeau to be on separate lines. But now we saw Andrew Brunette kind of experimented more as in one shift at a time and then going back to his 9-1-1 line for Bennett, Hubie, and Duclair, and then Barkov back with Verhaeghe and Mamin. And though they lost, and it's easy to see because they lost that Andrew Brunette, if he's going to stick with it, he should do it the whole game. But I actually am in favor of Andrew Brunette only doing it for 1 or 2 shifts instead of doing it at the 13-minute mark and doing it the rest of the way, because he did it first at the 13-minute mark and then he did it one more time towards the end of the game. Do you think that? So my question for you is, do you think that if he does make that line change that he should stick it in for the rest of the game?
I don't, and you touched on it a little bit, but I'm not sure if you immediately picked up on the significance of that timestamp there. The 13-minute mark, he's putting Barkov, Huberdeau, and Reinhart together at the 13-minute mark before the TV timeout, which I think is interesting because it gives you a quick super shift before they can get that TV timeout and rest, and you're not double shifting anyone. They're just going back to the regular line after the TV timeout, which I think is really, really smart game management from Andrew Brunette, and we have to give him credit for that. Barkov, Huberdeau, Reinhart for a shift at each TV timeout down the stretch in the third period. I think it's really smart to do that. It's like you're playing with house money as far as their time on ice. You can get them together and then give them a rest and send them back to their original lines. So no, I don't think they should do it for the entire rest of the game once making that switch, as long as he keeps it around those timeout periods. But yeah, you touched on the Claude Giroux rumors. I don't see that happening, but definitely got to find a concrete answer for Barkov's right wing going forward so that they don't have to adjust the lines as much, because Mamin, he's shown in spots that he's capable. Tonight wasn't his best game in his first game back, but it's been a revolving door for that right wing spot for Barkov, and they got to find a long-term solution for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. And one thing that I got to see more and more as the Florida Panthers being the home team and taking advantage of getting the last change as well.
Yeah.
You see that Nashville is putting one team and it's like, oh, we're going to Barkov and Huberto on this one. So I kind of saw that they were taking advantage of that as well. So that is really what I kind of noticed of what Andrew Burnett was doing. And you made a good point with TV timeouts, getting more of the rest, double shifting. So honestly, something I didn't even really think of on that one. So thank you for that, Jake. So we're going to talk about the rest of the homestand for the Florida Panthers, but we're also going to talk about a player that was sent down to the AHL today, some roster moves for the Florida Panthers. We're going to talk about that in the next segment. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And football might be over this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance, props to the next fired head coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And this episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait until the person behind the counter orders the parts for their computer, choosing only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 50, 30, or 100% more on the same parts at a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 30 years. RockAuto.com's prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to RockAuto.com and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at RockAuto.com. Continue on with this conversation on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I'm Armando Velez. I got Jake Winans here talking about this 6-4 loss against the Nashville Predators. Not the end of the world, Florida Panther fans. Just only their fourth loss on home ice this whole season, and they almost got a second double-digit winning streak on home ice. So nothing to hang our hat on for this one, but Jacob, there was a roster move that happened today, and we were anticipating this once morning skate happened, and we saw that Maxim Mamin was inserted on that top line and alternated with Nola Chari, and seeing that Tippett was an extra as well. So there had to be a corresponding roster move for this one, and what we anticipated happened. Owen Tippett being sent down to AHL Charlotte. And I spoke about this in our group chat, saying that Owen Tippett is in a lose-lose situation right now, because being sent down to AHL Charlotte doesn't increase his trade value. But when he is on the ice for the Florida Panthers, we don't see that energy that Owen Tippett, that we anticipated Owen Tippett bringing, like we saw in the preseason as well. Like what we saw with before Coach Q resigned and when he was inserted in that second line in the playoffs. What are you thinking of this demotion of Owen Tippett right now?
Yeah, so we knew it was coming. The writing was on the wall when Achari came off of long-term IR. We had one too many forwards, and someone was going to be squeezed out. Naturally, it's going to be the one guy who doesn't have to go through waivers. So rather than risk losing Joe Thornton or Frank Vetrano or Nola Chari or Maxim, Mamin is going to be in the lineup, but he would not be waiver eligible. But rather than losing one of those veteran players to waivers, you send Tippett. He hasn't been performing at the NHL level. I kind of talked about it in our chat. The coaching change seemed to really affect his game. He seems to be the type of player who needs a coach who's going to push him and drive him to stay on top of his game and give that effort. And I won't say his effort hasn't been there this season. It's just been spotty. He's had a couple of tough slumps that are hard on a young player mentally. And we've seen a lot of players hit a wall in their sophomore season. Huberdeau is one that comes to mind, who had a really bad second year in the league, and you see that happen sometimes. It's just more magnified when it's on a contender. So if he survives staying with the Panthers through the trade deadline, I would assume he'd be back up on the NHL roster when the playoff rosters expand. I don't see that happening. I really do feel like he's going to be traded for a win now piece. But like you said, the AHL is not really going to help his game any. He's too good for that league. He went down earlier this season and averaged well over a point per game in his short stint there. He's too good for that league now. So it's not helping his trade value, not really helping his development that much, except maybe to get his confidence back. So he's in a tough spot right now. If he does stick with the Panthers past the trade deadline, I think he still has a bright future ahead of him. But if he ends up somewhere else, I still think he's got a bright future. It just may not be with the Panthers, and that would be unfortunate for him. But yeah, he's got to get his development back on track, and he's in a tough spot right now to do it here.
Yeah, and I like what you said about what he did last go round when he was down in AHL Charlotte just earlier this season. And when you mentioned someone who doesn't have to go through waivers or risking losing someone, I have a hard time with the season that they're having that someone like Frank Vetrano wouldn't be claimed from off of waivers. But I think they didn't put him on waivers because he's been on this team for so long and he means so much to that locker room that the guys around him, he's really liked around the locker room. He's been around for a while, and I think if you were to put Frank Vetrano on waivers, that would send shockwaves around the locker room, and it wouldn't bode well as far as the relationships with the rest of the team.
Agreed.
Yeah. So somebody, like you said, somebody had to take that bait for the Panthers, and unfortunately it was Owen Tippett. And we're hoping that we get to see him sometime on the active roster again. And hey, maybe he gets another chance in that top 6 role and he gets to flourish in it. But right now, it's not looking too good for Owen Tippett, and we hope the best for him down in AHL. And like you said, get his confidence back and all. But Jacob, I'd like to thank you for joining the show on what Wednesdays are now going to be Winans Wednesdays on Locked On Panthers. So tell the people where they can follow you online.
Yes, you can find my work at pantherparkway.com, and I'm more active on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is at Jacob Winans 8. I'm usually tweeting during the games and keeping up with the Panthers news there.
And one of the most entertaining tweeters, especially when things don't go well for the Panthers, he keeps it pretty real on that end. So just loves to. I personally see all the rants in the chat, but then when it gets on the Twitter and seeing it, it's pretty entertaining, and all of you guys listening get to really see it. But thank you, Jacob, once again for joining the show.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. So tomorrow we're going to preview the game against the Columbus Blue Jackets as they'll be making their second and final visit to Sunrise, Florida. Last go round, the Florida Panthers scored 9, and then their second go round in Columbus, they scored 8. So we'll be talking more about that game on Thursday night, which will be an ESPN Plus / Hulu exclusive for this game. So if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark of the week, covering all the regular season activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen today. And for your second listen today, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roding and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available on all platforms. So subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Jake Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.